Good morning. Excuse me. Good afternoon. Good evening. I've often said on this platform that man is a creature of reason. Those who have studied the evolution of all living things, including man, tell us that we modern humans evolved from a creature that looked like a chimp standing on two legs. And that was 3 million years ago. And during that period, over that period to the modern day, the human brain has grown in leaps and bounds, making him the most intelligent creature on earth. Here is Professor Brian Cox explaining the evolution of man.
100,000 years, these variations in the Earth's orbit conspire to amplify the effects of precession. And in one place on Earth, the planet's geography amplifies them still further to produce periods of rapid and extreme climate fluctuation. "10 million years ago, this area was a flat plain covered in thick, dense forests, which made it the perfect place for our early tree-dwelling ancestors. But then, around that time, volcanic activity raised the land up in places by over 3 kilometers to form this, the Great Rift Valley. During those times when the Earth's orbit was at its most elliptical, the Rift Valley would experience intense rainfall. And deep lakes would appear dotted all over the landscape. And then, within just a few thousand years, conditions would change. It would become dry and arid, and those lakes would disappear. It's thought that it was this rapidly changing environment that drove our transformation from ape to man. And the reason we think that is because we found the evidence strewn across the valley floor. Beginning with our early ancestors who settled in the newly formed rift. 3 million years ago, the hominin species that could be found in East Africa was Australopithecus, kind of a grim-looking chap. Now, this is really not much more than a chimpanzee that stands upright, certainly in brain capacity. Its brain volume is around 400 cc's. But then, 1.8 million years ago, something spectacular happens. You get an explosion of hominin species, including this Homo erectus, with a brain size that is double Australopithecus. Then, 800,000 years ago, this species appears, Homo heidelbergensis, accompanied by another rapid increase in brain size from 800 cc's to around 1200 cc's. Then, we wind forward to 200,000 years ago. This skull, called Homo 2, a brain size of around 1400, 1500 cc, which is close to my brain size. So this is one of the first skulls that you can say is a modern human. Interestingly, each one of these increases in brain size occurred at a time when the Earth's orbit was at its most elliptical. And the climate at its most volatile. So the theory is that human intelligence, our intelligence, is a response to periods of very rapid and violent climate change, specifically here in the Rift Valley of East Africa. And that ultimately it was the precise geography of our corner of the universe that made us who we are. You know, I find it quite dizzying, very powerful thought that my existence, the existence of my brain, the existence of us, our species, Homo sapiens, as a result of changes in the Earth's orbit, which depend on the precise position and orbits of the other planets in the solar system, the way that the Earth's spin axis moves around, which depends on the position and mass of the moon and the position and mass of the sun, and the influence of those changes on the climate here on Earth, and in particular, that there's a place like this that can amplify those changes in just such a way that it makes living things, my ancestors, respond by increasing their brain size, increasing their intelligence.
Well, a sobering thought. And all the evidence are that modern humans, we are all roughly the same. We've all got the same brain capacity. I think what makes it even more interesting is that why is it that some nations, some individuals have become prosperous, whilst others have not? Yet we've got the same brain capacity. Why is it that some nations have successfully landed a man on the moon, while others were failing to cross the street? I think these are profound questions that those of us in Africa in particular cannot ignore. It is said that when Julius Nyerere, the president of Tanzania, was told that the Americans had planted the man on the moon in 1969, he is the one who moaned that we in Africa are failing to cross the street. What has made Julius Nyerere one of the most visionary African leaders is that whilst he was not in his lifetime maybe able to change the lives of people of Tanzania significantly, he was at least able to recognize the problem, to think on the problem. Why is it that we are failing to cross the street? When you look at that in greater depth, that's when you realize why we are a failed state. The willingness to look at a problem, because that is what intelligence is all about. If you're going to make the same mistake repeated over and over again, all he's saying is you're not very intelligent. That's what it means. That is what it is saying. A more intelligent person will be saying, wait a minute, I've been here before. I've done this and I know it has produced this result. What is the point of me doing the same thing again, expecting a different result? Why should there be a different result when nothing else has changed? We in Zimbabwe have been independent for the last 45 years. Ever since the first independence elections in 1980, ZANU PF has rigged the elections. They have denied the ordinary person a meaningful say in the governance of the country. The Constitution says, oh, you must hold regular elections. They've done that. But those elections had been predictable to the point where ZANU PF knew they'd won the election before the first ballot is cast. And what makes us a failed people is that we have failed to realize that ZANU PF was shortchanging us. It was taking us through this meaningless process of holding elections when we know the results, what the results will be. I think we've let ourselves down. We, the people, have let ourselves down. In the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe realized that as long as ZANU PF has got the carte blanche powers to rig elections, the regime will stay in power. And so the people decided that they would elect an opposition whose number one purpose would be to implement democratic reforms to stop ZANU PF rigging elections. That was simple enough. There was nothing complex about that. What has been lacking is the follow-up. MDC, Triple C leaders have been in power now, on the political stage at least, for the last 25 years. And they failed to implement even one token reform. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to ask yourself, why? Were these people not elected specifically to implement reforms to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections? And so if they fail to implement even one token reform in 25 years, surely we have got to accept that they have failed. And yet this has not happened. Emerson Mnangagwa was able to rig the 2023 elections and get away with it because Nelson Chamisa and company participated in those flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process was flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they will give ZANU PF legitimacy. And yet the people themselves did not have the common sense to realize that Chamisa was scorning them. He was so keen to encourage his supporters to participate. He told them what one can only describe as an idiotic lie that he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. Hashtag God is in it. And nearly 2 million of his followers believed him and participated in the 2023 elections, thus giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. The irony is, if you try to speak to some of these Chamisa Chete brigade, just to get them to acknowledge that Chamisa did lie to them is a serious challenge. They cannot accept that Chamisa lied because they want him to be a demigod who can do no wrong. All that comes back to intelligence. Here is somebody who doesn't have the intellect to accept the truth and the reality on the ground, even when it affects him. Because by participating in flawed elections to perpetuate the ZANU-PF dictatorship, it's clearly obvious. The man on the coal face of the failed state is the ordinary citizen. And so why are ordinary citizens in their millions participating in a flawed process to perpetuate their own suffering? Intellect. Here is Professor Brian Cox, just to finish this program, explaining on the sophistication of the human brain. Excuse me. Let me get this one right.
This is it, the human brain. And it might not look like it, but it's the most complex physical structure we know of anywhere in the universe. There are over 80 billion neurons in the average human brain. That's comparable to the number of stars in a galaxy. That doesn't even begin to describe its complexity. Those neurons form connections between 10,000 and 100,000 connections to other neurons. And it's from that complex circuitry that the human condition emerges. Everything that makes us who we are comes from this 1.5 kilograms of matter that resides in the skull of every human that has ever walked the earth. So, who are we? Well, a possible answer is that we are something that emerges from electrical activity inside this impossibly complex blob of matter. I love Ethiopia, and not just because it's a beautiful country, but because of an idea. It's impossible to sit here and not catch a glimpse out of your peripheral vision of a line of ghosts stretching back 10,000 generations, because we are all related to someone who lived here 200,000 years ago. And those first Homo sapiens weren't that different to us. In many ways, they were the same. So if you could bring a newborn baby from the Rift Valley all those years ago to the 21st century and subject it to a 21st century education, then there's no reason why it couldn't achieve anything that a modern child could achieve. It could even be an astronaut.
Well, I think it's a very nice, pleasant thought to think about. But I think we in Africa, we in Zimbabwe, before we can think of being an astronaut, we've got to get some basic things right. We've got to learn how to cross the street. We have a failed political system. 45 years, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. It's not rocket science. It's just that we've not applied ourselves to answering the question, what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections? And making sure that we do have those conditions. We are still struggling to cross the street. And this is the 21st century. Other nations have made incredible advances. Since 1969, the rest of the world have developed even more complex machines that have gone beyond the moon, deep into space, explored our solar system and beyond. They've looked at the human brain itself and have been able to carry out some incredibly sophisticated repair work to the brain. They have been able to split the smallest atom, matter, to its elements. The last 50 years have seen human civilization, human knowledge expand by leaps and bounds. One is really scared to see how much we in third world countries are lagging behind. Catching up will be easy because the human brain can be retrained. But at the present moment, the opportunities for doing that are shrinking fast and furious. If you look at some of the schools in Zimbabwe today, you can't believe this is a school fit for the 21st century. And yet, there you are. It is very common for Zimbabwe students, end of the academic year, to hear they had the best results with a 3% pass rate. And yet, all those failed students if it was grade 7, they'll find themselves in Form 1. If they were in Form 2, they'll go to Form 3. We become obsessed with quantity when there's absolutely no quality at all. I think this whole generation of students who have been ill-educated, one can only feel sorry for them. How are they going to cope in a 21st century where technology has moved so fast in so short a time? They will have to do catch up, an impossible task. So I come back to the original question. We are all descendant of the modern humans, and we are all supposed to be a creature of reason by virtue of our huge brain size, 1,500 cc's, compared to 400 cc's for a chimp. So why is it some have advanced so much, whilst others we've left behind? And to fail to hold free, fair, and credible elections 45 years after independence, to me, is unforgivable. There's absolutely no excuse why we are failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. None. And those who are involved in being so easily conned, all I can say is you are the one who is paying dearly for your naivety, ignorance, so that they are so easily gullible, so easily fooled. Food for thought. Thank you very much. Have a good day.